Hi there, Alison here with another Cab Franc du jour. Today we are in Chinon and we're looking at the Domaine de la Marinière 2017 Vieilles Vignes, Chinon. The Desbourdes family purchased the farm at Marinière in Panzoult back in 1965, and it took them several years to prepare the land for viticulture, and finally by 1971 Domaine de la Marinière was born. Renaud Desbourdes took over from his parents in 1999, and today Renaud's son Boris has joined him at the estate. And if you are not following Boris on Instagram, you absolutely must, for a behind-the-scenes look at the necessary but perhaps sometimes unglamorous aspects of being a vigneron, as well as his eclectic collection of socks. Boris is an absolute must-follow, and I will be sure to link to his details in the post. So today's wine is taking us to the commune of Panzoult, which is on the right bank or the north side of the Vienne River in Chinon. And this could be, I think, perhaps the first in a series of videos I do looking at wines from specific communes in Chinon and looking at these terroirs in a little bit more detail. So Panzoult is just downriver, so east of Cravant-Les-Côteaux, and it's the second largest commune of production in Chinon after Cravant-Les-Côteaux, which actually represents 50% of the appellations production. So in Panzoult, we have more or less three areas for viticulture. We have the Alluvial terrace that is very close to the Vienne. We're like 300 to 500 meters away from the Vienne River here. And essentially this is an extension of the same alluvial terrace that we find in Cravant-Les-Côteaux. So that we have here deep, sandy, silty soils. There's very little clay or gravel in these soils as well. Now, there is another part of a portion of alluvial soils that are set back a little bit from the Vienne, about 2 kilometers northeast of the Vienne, in and around the hamlet of Rancé. And here we have, again, these deep, sandy, silty soils, but there is more gravel and pebbles in the topsoil here, anywhere from 25% to upwards to 75% stones in the topsoil. Finally, we do have an area of sloped vineyards in Panzoult, and these are at the north end of the commune. And essentially, there's a forest here, and the sloped vineyards essentially follow the tree line of the forest. So they curve in a little bit of an arc shape. They can be either on more of a southern exposure or a bit more of a southeast exposure, depending on where you are along the tree line. And of course, this is where we find a greater impact of the Tuffeau chalk here, and you can be either on the middle Turonian or the upper Turonian Tuffeau, depending on where you are along the tree line and where you are on the slope. And these vineyards will also have a little bit more clay in the topsoil as well. Now, today's wine is coming from around a 3 to 4 hectare parcel of vines that were planted between 1975 and 1985, and they're from 3 neighboring lieux-dits in Panzoult. We have Les Rébotés, Bourg and also La Galipe. And these 3 lieux-dits are on the slope, so we're tucked up very close to the tree line here, and we are more or less in the eastern part of Panzoult. So these vineyards will have a slightly more southeast facing exposure. Now, in terms of the soil, the impact here is more of the upper Turonian yellow Tuffeau chalk. And then Boris explained to me that their parcels, where we are here in this part of Panzoult, because of how close we are to the forest and how far away we are from the Vienne, these parcels are actually afforded a little bit extra frost protection in the springtime. And then the nature of the soils here, he explained that the wines will have a bit more of a marked tannic structure in them as well. Now, from a winemaking perspective, this wine, the fruit is a combination of hand-picked as well as a bit of machine-picked fruit. And the fruit is all destemmed, and fermentation takes place in larger concrete vats with indigenous yeast, and there is a little bit longer maceration time, so 3 to 4 weeks on skins with some regular pump overs during that time. It ages in the concrete vats for a couple of months, and then they transfer the wine into older 400-liter oak barrels where it stays for about 6 months before bottling. Now, these terroirs that I speak about in Chinon, they really do inform the vigneron's decisions that they make in the cellar. So these alluvial soils that are deeper, sandy, silty soils, the fruit that comes from these vineyards is really best for shorter maceration time on skins, gentler extractions, and as a result, they produce wines that are a bit more fruity and more early drinking in terms of their style. And then, of course, we have the vineyards that are on the slopes, and this is where we see a greater impact of the Tuffeau chalk. There tends to be a little bit more clay here. And the fruit coming from these vineyards actually benefit from a bit more extraction, longer time on skins. And as a result, the vigneron is getting more color, more tannin, more flavor out of these grapes. And thus these wines tend to be a bit more structured and intended for longer term aging. So this wine is coming from the slope, so let's tuck in. Now the nose has a moderate intensity and it is a little bit more compact. There's a density to the nose, which suggests to me that there is a little bit more of a clay influence here in terms of the soil. And the nose leans very savory and kind of sweet tart fruit. So dusty raspberry, a little bit of wild strawberry here, maybe even a touch of a black currant note. And there's also a nice earthy mushroom meatiness to the nose as well, which I quite like. And I would say the pyrazines are on equal footing here. They come through for me as a nice cedar undertone, a bit of wet autumn leaves, maybe even a touch of like a black currant leaf note as well. But the nose leans more kind of, I would say, earthy or savory, and a bit more on that sweet tart red fruit spectrum. There is a ton of acidity in this wine. It's bright, it's crunchy, and actually the palate leans a little bit more tart in terms of those red fruits, like snappy, like a cranberry note almost on the palate. In addition to that, there is a gentle spice note, like a baking spice undertone, but it's not too pronounced, the spice element. But the story with this wine is the tannins. So the tannins are rather firm, they're taut, they're finely woven, and they're grippy. There's a chalkiness to the tannins, and the tannins linger on the palate, and they stick there, and they almost create this like a corseted effect, like a cinching in of the whole palate. And as a result, the wine sits a bit more linear as opposed to a wine that I would describe as more round. There's also something about this wine that suggests to me it's not very fleshy. It's a little bit on the leaner side, which suggests that maybe there's a little bit more of an impact of the tuffo here in terms of those soils. But overall, this wine is very serious. It's focused, it's structured, and persistent. I would definitely classify this wine as a Vin de Garde. There's enough concentration here, there's enough acidity and tannin that you could hold this wine definitely for the medium term for sure. The other thing I would note about this wine is I would classify this as a bit more traditional in terms of its style, as opposed to a wine that I would describe more as modern or contemporary, where there's a little bit more polish. This just feels a little bit more traditional, a little bit more humble, honest, and down to earth. And I think that stands to reason. Based on my interactions with the estate so far, all that makes sense in terms of the people that are behind the wine and this wine in terms of that overall profile. This is my first introduction to the wines from Domaine de la Marinière, and I look forward to tasting more of them in the future. If you have a favorite Cab Franc from Chinon, let me know what it is in the comments below. And of course, as always, I will be back again soon with another wine. Cheers.